Today we are visiting the ruins of the abandoned Monte Cristo Mine near Wickenburg, Arizona, and then we explore an unnamed, abandoned underground mine nearby. Monte Cristo Mine is located in Yavapai County in the Black Rock Mining District, off of Constellation Road, 12 miles north of Wickenburg, Arizona. It was primarily a silver mine, with gold and copper being secondary minerals that were mined. Monte Cristo is Spanish for Mount Christ and was started by Ezra Thayer, who created the mine claim after driving off some Mexican miners who weren't citizens and had no legal ownership of the land. Thayer worked from 1912 to 1920 trying to get the mine started. Eventually, high-grade silver and a large gold vein were discovered, and by 1925, about 250 miners and other entrepreneurs lived around Monte Cristo Mine. The main shaft was dug down to the 1,200-foot level, with several miles of drift tunnels fanning out at approximately every 100 feet. The ore was hauled by wagon to Phoenix. Thayer sold the mine to Chauncey C. Julian in 1926. Julian was a famous speculator in other people's money and had left California, where he sold stock and fraudulent oil leases. Julian offered investors free luxury train rides from Los Angeles to visit Monte Cristo Mine and Leadfield, another mine of his. By 1939, mining had slowed down and the town had slowly emptied out. Julian's later story is unknown, although rumor has it that he may have killed himself in China, where he had fled to elude his creditors. His other partners were all convicted in federal court of mail fraud. The site sat abandoned for the next 30 years. By 1976, the property was purchased by Goldex for $200,000, who intended to refurbish the mine, but due to the amount of water in the mine in the shaft, efforts were abandoned. The most recent activity at the mine was some test drilling performed in 1984. All the wooden structures have burnt down over the years, but the headframe still stands over the steep incline shaft leading into the underground workings. Exploring the underground workings would require climbing gear in order to safely descend. Across from the headframe on the other side of the shaft is the motor house for the hoist. The motor is gone, but the gears and large brake and clutch are still operable by pulling the large squeaky levers. Brake. Fire came through here last year and burned whatever. There are foundations where you can make out where old buildings once stood. The one building that is partially intact is the shop, which has corrugated metal sides and roof. I can make out the light bulb sockets in the ceiling, so they used to have electricity running through the mine. I had electricity in here. See the junction box. There is an immense amount of tailings at the site and some other large tailings piles in the area nearby, which were part of the mine. I don't know if these dumps are comprised of purely waste rock or whether there is ore here waiting for one day to be processed to extract the gold, silver, and copper. I noticed many of the rocks in the tailings shimmered from the sugar-like crystals embedded in them, and some had patches of blue and green which could indicate copper content. Copper oxides. Just make sure it glistens. There's a car here. There were a couple of wrecked cars on the property, and in the distance is where we are heading next, where I want to show Dianne a mine, that I discovered while riding my dirt bike and exploring with my friend Dan. There is a link to a video from my first visit to that mine, which was my friend Dan's first time to ever venture into a mine. Dan grew up living in Wickenburg, but it took a Bay Area city slicker like me to show him this part of Arizona history just a few miles from his home. So once we were done looking at Monte Cristo, we continued up Constellation Road a couple more miles, then turned off onto the unimproved dirt road that led down a series of switchbacks to the unnamed mine I discovered. I've searched and could not find anything that describes a mining claim or a prospect site at that location we're going to. Apparently the person who mined it wanted to keep it a secret. The road requires careful driving and high clearance because in some sections ravines have washed away part of the roadway, and in others boulders have fallen onto the road. There were no tire tracks visible, so this place must not be visited very often. Just before the last hairpin turn above the mine, we came across a large pipe coming straight up out of the ground along the side of the road. I took a look down and recognized this as an air vent to the mine workings below. Once we parked and grabbed our flashlights, there was a bit of a scramble down some loose rocks at the entrance to the horizontal shaft. I was very impressed with the size of the tunnel leading into the mine. I'm 6'4" and did not have to duck as we slowly walked deeper into the mine. Dews led the way and was eager to explore and go deeper. Meanwhile, Mia stood guard at the entrance. She wanted nothing to do with the underground workings, and she waited patiently at the tunnel entrance. The adit, which is a horizontal passage into a mine as opposed to a tunnel which passes through a mine and comes out the other side, was carved out of rock. It was a little dry and there were no signs of previous cave-ins, so it seemed pretty safe at first. But as we got further in, we started seeing timbers and the different methods used to hold the rock in place. The timbers form braces across the width of the passage. Yeah. Okay. These places, if you looked up, you could also see two types of rock coming together. So I think this is called a shear fault. Sometimes gold-bearing quartz veins will form along boundaries between two different rock types. So maybe that is what miners were chasing here. We passed two splits in the tunnel, but only one went much deeper than the others. In some places, the rock was more crumbly, and the miners held up the sides and ceilings using large bolts that went into the rock. Some places had strips of sheet metal that the bolts went through, and in other places there was a mesh like a cyclone fence material bolted to the ceiling. This made me nervous because it was obvious in some places the rocks were loose and being held up just by the wire mesh. I encouraged Dianne to keep moving, not stop it under those places.
they get the drilling mostly done for
We went
last.
a little further, then
But then
Dianne was turned around.
they put these things in the
and
rock
I
here,
guided it back to
which I think are to strengthen it, to tighten up the rock. These things. The ceiling how it's all supposed to be kept up, you can tell there's like it's all,
paint marked certain places that had the measurements recorded, such as the 50-foot mark. We went a little further, then Dianne and Dews turned around and I guided them back to where they could see the light at the entrance. But then I turned around and went back in to see how far the adit led into the hillside. I came across a wooden ladder that went straight up another 20 or 30 feet. I figured it must be going up to where the air vent pipe was that we saw on the road above. I passed a PVC pipe with markings on it for every foot, so it was a large ruler, basically. Once I reached the end, which I estimate was about 150 to 200 feet, I took out my rock pick and chipped a few samples to take home for analysis, which means I either grind them into dust for gold panning, or they are outlining the planter beds in our backyard landscaping. I listened for any sounds of rocks cracking other than where I was hitting. My biggest fear was that there might be a section in the tunnel that was weak and ready to collapse, and all it would take is the vibration from the rock pick hitting the sides to trigger a collapse. I tried not to think about that and focused instead on getting all that I could carry off with my bare hands. Then I turned around and headed back to Dianne, the Jeep, and I relieved Mia once she saw me emerge. I can't help but wonder, how long did it take to dig out this mine? Was it profitable for the owner? Did the owner do most of the digging? Did anyone get hurt making the mine? Why did they stop? Could the work be continued and maybe make a fortune to someone with the right skills in a market where the price of gold is now near the all-time high? Maybe someday I will find a quartz vein with placer gold. I'm in the right area to be looking. The Black Rock Mining District is where there are dozens of gold mines, and some of them are still in operation. Plus there is the little San Domingo Wash nearby that has dozens of mining claims in places where there are no, and other places where there are no claims. I found a few small specks of gold there and plan on returning. Even if I don't find a lot of gold, I'm glad I came and saw what the miners saw, and I feel a connection with the history that comes from swinging a rock pick deep underground at the end of a minimally formed road just wide enough for a Jeep to crawl its way down. Well, that's all I have for this video, which I guess is where I'm supposed to say, if you like this video and would like to see more content of exploring abandoned mines, then please like and subscribe.